Welcome to Portals of Perception. Today we are inquiring about the updating of religion in the ways it is emerging now in our lives and anywhere we see this phenomenon around the world. We have gathered with Portal friends who spontaneously responded to an invitation to participate in this exploration. So let me put the inquiry in context and then invite you to offer your insights and your experience. And to be very clear on the front end, we are approaching this not as you would if you were a student or a scholar of comparative religion, where you would deeply compare the theologies of different religion and streams within a religion. The way we come into this has more the tone and the nature of our own individual quest and journey and experience to discover the spiritual significance of life and the highest communions that may be possible for us humans at this time. And so within that, here is the context. Well, first, here is the inquiry. What is the new or updated religion? Or something like a religion, because it's possible that the functions that religion offered people throughout history, such as a place of gathering, such as a story and myth, such as a set of clear directions in ethical and moral dilemmas and so on, it is possible that that function is emerging and is represented in other ways at this time. And that is what we are asking. How is it expressing itself individually and collectively? And what is a way for us to honor and harvest the best from world religions into this emerging update? And the context in which this inquiry arose just in the last 3 days was that we have been in a 3-day journey with the Epoch Network, the Epoch Journey Network, and we have chosen this just a few days ago to focus that journey, that 3-day weekend, on the 5 epochal stories and the cultivation of story 4. And so I'm going to very briefly frame that and then place the inquiry about religion and its updating inside that context. So in the Epoch story, we realize that the way history, his story, which we call as story 1, we define that as story 1, which describes what's largely in the history books as the epoch transition and unfolds through the 3,500 years with the rise and fall of cultures and civilizations, that in itself is highly insufficient in appreciation of history, because there are several problems in the way we appreciate, the way we tell, the way we teach of history. First is that history is written by the victors, the people that conquered, and with very little say, with very little left for the voices of those that were conquered, the vanquished, the people that were largely extinct. Their aspirations, their hopes, their traditions, their sentiments, their celebrations are not so very much part of the written and told history. And therefore there is a bias into the way we tell history, because it celebrates and honors mostly the values and the aspirations of the victors. And add to that most of the way we review and appreciate history is now in a mass education context of the last several centuries, where increasingly the story of humanity is viewed inside an economic context, socio-economic context, where the well-being of a society is appreciated in the context of its GDP, not in the context of its religious well-being, spiritual well-being, social well-being, and all those other qualities. And it was in that context that we said, well, we are tracking the epoch and its development and evolution with and through the inclusion of story 2, which we call and appreciate as her story, which includes the invisible realms, the invisible dimensions that include the sentiments and the hopes and the aspirations of all the people that live through time, and our ability to attune to their values and their aspirations, and also to attune to the way they celebrated their religious devotion, which is the context of our inquiry here today. And as we attune to story 2, it brings online for us story 3, which is the realization that the way knowledge, the way perception has been metabolized and internalized throughout the ages continued to shapeshift and evolve, and that we are largely a product of the last 4 centuries, where knowledge was very much a head material, a head construct. We appreciate knowledge very much through concepts, and people in the ancient world, for them, words were more something that was filled with presence, like looking at a tree, like looking at the birds on the tree, like looking at the cloud. The sense, the vibrancy, and the way of being in the human faculty more porous, more open to the interior living presence of those realms, whatever it was that humans could look at, was more readily available. And I'm not overly romanticizing the ancient world, because there was a lot of hardship in it as well. But what I am saying is that when people were in that space in themselves that was associated with a religious quest, they were much more attuned to the presence and the quality that accompanied whatever it was that they were attuning to. So over that weekend process, we brought 2 additional stories that were related to this idea that we get to now review the story of the epoch with the capacity to metabolize the dialectic story, where we can do the healing liberation of what has been arrested and frozen in time with our appreciation today, and that we can also contemplate about story 5, which is the evolutionary story, the evolutionary crown to reach for. And that when we do these things, what we do in story 4, we are actually inviting the rewriting of the past. And it was that very much the context, the sentiment within which we said, well, how about if we gather again a couple of days later and inquire about the place of religion? Because story 4 enabled us to reflect on whatever it was that has happened throughout the human story and harvest the best of it, and also bring to it dialectic awareness, by which we mean we can consciously metabolize experience from the past, release and let go of what is no longer functionally viable and needed and important, and or that we will choose to harvest into story 5. And therefore, as we do this, we get to rewrite the past. And when we endeavor in story 5, there is in it the invitation that we are possibly including generations into the future, and we are putting the scaffolds for their cathedral, in this case, not the cathedral built outside of man on the ground of the planetary space around us, but the cathedral we get to build inside ourselves. And the sense in doing this work was that it is inspired by a religious intuition and religious motivation. So that was the reason as to why we said, well, we didn't have time over the weekend to do a deep dive into religion. How about we come here today and ask these questions. What is it that we can say from the experience of our life, the way we are experiencing, not so much religion as an institutionalized organization, but the religious motivation, the religious intuition, the religious impulse, the religious inspiration. What is it that we are discovering that's emerging for us and that we see is now emerging in the world as a desire for update? Because we see clearly that many young people, they can't find what they, at least historically, you'd expect to find in religion. So they seek all sorts of other answers and solutions. So what is it that we can say about that, and how is this impulse expressing itself individually and collectively? So how about that as an inroad into the exploration? And with that, I'll invite you to offer your insights, and we'll play jazz with what wants to emerge here.
Yes, hello everyone. I'm Theodora. I live and work in Greece. I have studied philosophy, ancient Greek, and I'm teaching language, Greek and modern Greek and ancient Greek, European history. And I'm saying this because through these studies I have come to meet many great minds, many great quests and searches. And I've also come to meet what you were talking about, Aviv, how the ancients appreciated the world in a different space, in a different way. Part of it is because everything was so slow. So I will say one thing, that the ancients thought about the arts, the music, architecture, poetry, as inspired by divine powers that were willing to speak to the human. So for them, religion was to spend maybe 30 years to put together a temple that would have a permanent, long-lasting, after their life existence, which we now go and visit and we photograph and everything. But I'm looking into the values, because that's where, for me at least, that's where religion begins to take shape, to take form in the daily life. So I'm looking at the value that the ancients are teaching us, that we can place, or we can acknowledge, we can register with simple natural things. So for me, one of the religion, my own expression of these values is my love and taking care of the little beings that exist on the planet. And I don't mean necessarily the spiders, but I mean the cats, the dogs, the birds. And this is something I've done for 40 years. And for some people around us, they may call it a hobby. But if there is a line of, I value the planet, I value the lives that live on the planet, I value her expression into these many beings, which are so different. We have in the garden, we live now 14 cats, and they're all very different. And now it happened that whilst we were in the Epoch journey a few days ago on Friday, we started the meeting and there's many people, 120, and then an hour into the Zoom gathering, one cat decides to give birth in front of our door, 1 meter. And I'm looking out the window and I tell my husband, she's giving birth, she needs help. So we grab the cat, we bring it on the sofa, and whilst all the process was going on and very intelligent things were coming up, we helped the cat to deliver, pull a bit on it. Anyway, but this is one way that I see religion today can appear through the human being that has a degree of cognizance about value for the planet. and knowing that there's much more intelligence and wisdom that the Great Mother, the Great Church, the planet offers in abundance. So that's what I would contribute. Thank you.
Thank you, Theodora.
Hello. It's Trevor Wynne, English, living in Wales. Very much caught by what you said, Aviv. And what caught me most was a religious life. What is it? How can it affect particularly young people with whom I have a great deal of contact, from grandchildren to teenagers and a little bit older than teenagers? My experience has taught me that when I let myself free, when I am myself, then they can respond. When the magic of being oneself is let loose, there is nothing to hide. It is a religious experience to do that. People can laugh, they can cry, you can be at fault, but you are being human, learning, experienced person. This is all I have to say. I'm 77. I love the religious aspect of our uniqueness, our individuality, our fun, our laughter, our appreciation, and our love for the human race. That's all I want to say.
Thank you, Trevor.
Shalom from Israel, and therefore also a Jew, which is valid to the context. I thought where to start this important contemplation, and it seems that the place to start is actually examining or thinking about the religious impulse itself. It's not the religion that is important, it is the religious impulse that gives rise to something very fundamental in human life. And I just thought a few moments ago, there are two important movements that started in the 19th century. One is called theosophy, and the other is called anthroposophy. And it's fascinating because it highlights the two major players in this story. Theosophy does the God part, and anthroposophy does the human part. And the story that we are seeking is the story of the drama of the relationship between the source and human beings. And it seems to me that the religious impulse, which is a deep place in humans of longing and belonging and being part of, is based upon the fact that we are not complete. And therefore we seek completion with something which is outside of ourselves. And this is a major part of the religious impulse, that which keeps us searching and looking for communion. And this communion, the need for it, can be expressed in many ways. It expresses itself in our relationship with human, or finding a partner, or joining a football club, or being in the fan club of some music idol. We basically want to be part of. So the religious impulse is searching for the highest point of communion that we can find in our lives. And it emanates not from religion, it emanates from a spiritual presence that lives inside the temple of ourselves. So the place to seek it is within. And we are no longer in times where we need to build cathedrals. It was said, cathedrals of stones don't evolve. So we need to seek it inside. the personal religion, because it is a very much now tending to be an individual journey for each person, and taking care of the temple and building the temple in ourselves, and finding the communion, first of all, within. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I studied religion for a long, long time, trying to find out something which was true and real for me. So when I was young, like age of 6, I read the Bible, and I read other things that I could get my hand on, but it was limited in as much as I couldn't actually get access to very much. Now I look at today, there is access to just about everything. So it's not a matter of can you find that which is for you, but can you recognize that which is for you as an individual, and then can you take responsibility in that so that you can actually carry on through your life responsible for that which you feel is for you. I think every individual is different. So there's no more room for structured religion, but to come together in a shared sentiment as individuals of their own, with their own power, basically, would be a very, very powerful thing. So it really is, it's about self-responsibility. And that responsibility then allows freedom to do whatever you need to do, as long as you stay responsible with it. So I think that's what I would say in a very, very brief way about it.
Yeah. Perhaps if I may offer just a gentle resistance on one point for us to grapple with. The moment we say there is no room for structure anymore, we put another structure in place. So because there are many people who want the structured religion still. What you're saying, I imagine, is in your experience, the structure didn't work for you.
Yeah, I can also see that, well, let's say structures are temporary. They're no longer, as Absalom said, they're no longer cathedrals. The structures are what are necessary for whatever today calls for, and whoever you're with. Because when you're dealing with another person, a structure happens between the two of you. And that can be literally anyone you meet. And everyone that I've ever met in my life is basically a good person. So it's a mystery as to why the world is as it is. So that's a thing to consider. And I feel that that's where the ancient structures, the ones that are outdated, they're losing power, but not sufficient to let people go, as the song goes.
Thank you, Nigel. You're also leaving us with this subtle link and connection you're making between structures that are outdated and the kind of problems we see in the world. So that's to be furthered and developed.
I want to tell a small story to get to the point that I would bring. When my children they were young teenagers, we went to visit Grandma and Grandpa, and they were elders in their church, and it was a big deal for them to go to church, for us to go to church with them. And somewhere in the middle of the sermon, my sweet daughter turns to me and says, "Mom, he's been dead 2,000 years. Why are we doing this?" Now, the church is quiet, right? And everybody's supposed to be listening. And so we had a very quiet conversation. And I asked her, "What do you feel here?" She said, "Nothing." She said, "If God's in the trees and God's in the animals, God's in me, and I should be able to feel it. And I don't need anybody else to tell me how to do it." And I think she was actually right. And She's now an adult, but she's spent time, and so have I, trying to see when and where do I feel it? How does this play out? And how can I bring what I feel into the world to make it a better place? So that's what I would add.
Thank you.
What drew me to this call was the fact that it's asking, where is religion now? Because in my experiences with dealing with world religions, I find it's all referenced back, and it's all referenced to God being out there. But I've got 5 grandchildren at the moment, and I've witnessed each of them, some of them recently, learning to walk. And that seems like one of the first theatres of a religious urge. Because one of them has acted, he's ended up in accident and emergency more than once because he's battered his head. But it didn't stop him. And it seems like it's religious to have this urge to make better of oneself and to lift oneself up and to cause us to study and work to make ourselves better. And it seems like in there is the possibility of communion with others. I was at a Catholic church recently because it was my eldest granddaughter's first communion. And I thought, this is really weird, because if you see her with her friends and my fare with her, we are in communion and something graces that. And it seemed weird that the church had kind of possessed it. But it seemed it's all about the urge to lift oneself up.
Yeah, the urge to lift oneself up, I think that's fabulous, Nigel, really moving. That really moves me, the whole idea of lifting myself up. And perhaps it actually connects very well into what I'd like to say. But I'd like to say hello to everybody, first of all. Hi. And actually, I want to say hello to you, whoever you are that's watching, viewing this. And actually, I really hope that for you being participant today is enriching. I was certainly really, really excited, actually, by the invitation to join today, because I think this is such a it's a heck of a thing to really think about and to really wonder about what it means and what is its significance in the affairs of people and in life, because it's something that we've been sort of banging on about for a very long time, one way or the other, and that tells me it must be important, because we seem to be sort of hardwired or predisposed to it, whatever it is. And so I was having a little think, not too much of a think, but a little bit of a think before today. And one of the things that came to me was the idea of religious pilgrimage. And so before I say what I want to say, I would like to be clear and say that I wouldn't for a moment want to imply that the religious pilgrimages that people embark on and have embarked on don't have value. I think they have a huge value and a huge significance for people's lives. And today, I'd like to offer a different view, what I think may be a different view that appeared to me. And it's to do with what I really think is probably one of the most profound and mysterious and difficult and wonderful pilgrimages, but important, that a person can make. And that is the pilgrimage to oneself. the inner path and the inner journey of discovery and voyage of discovery, to try to really touch and come to know oneself. And it strikes me there's really two parts to that, two lines to that. And there probably are many others, because life's like that. You think there's one or two features, and then you look again and there's another three or four. But the two that I've seen is that one part is that we're all formed differently. There's something different, there's something unique, there's something about the arrangement of each person that is not like any other. And so that's part of this inner pilgrimage for me, is to discover what that is and find out what the clues are as I live, because there are clues. And sometimes I've done a little bit of a backward trace, and if I get a bit lost or a bit confused, and say, well, what are those things through the journey so far that have stood out, that are clues about who it is that I am? So that's one line, and that goes on and goes on and goes on, and that's never going to stop. And it's marvelous. And then the other line I see in this inner pilgrimage, this wonderful inner pilgrimage, is then how the outward journey really relates to the inner journey. So as you go outwards, you discover more about what you are on the inside, and especially when you engage and when you meet with others, or when you do things and try things that are new for you, and what you get to discover about yourself through the outward action. And both are really important. And also not just thinking about who am I in relation to my uniqueness, but also the other side of that, which is to actually decide for yourself how you choose to be. Because that also forms up who you are, and it's conscious and it's deliberate if you choose for it to be. And for me, that's totally religious, simply because I decided to do it. And whatever it was that caused my life gave me the opportunity to decide for myself. I don't have to elect into a conformity. I can choose for myself how I would wish to think about things and respond to things. So that's my offering about the marvelous inner religious pilgrimage.
Watching Jeremy there and the beautiful plants in the background that he has surrounding him there, one of the things that is deeply religious for me is to plant a seed in a piece of soil, and I'm a gardener, and watch it over the period of time grow from something you can hardly see to a large plant that produces and produces and produces something many, many thousand times its original size, and produces flowers, it produces fruit, and then it produces more of itself to seed for next year. That is absolutely incredibly miraculous and wonderful for me to watch. And now maybe that's not the same for other people, but for me, that is part of my religious experience. But what I really wanted to say was that one of the questions that you asked originally is, what can we harvest from the religions of today's world?
Yes.
Into the future? Now, when you look at today's world, my initial response to that is not an awful lot, because what I see is the majority of religions today are very tyrannical, especially in how the female of the species is treated. In some religions, girls aren't allowed to have an education. They're not allowed to fulfill any possibility of their own. They exist as supplicants and slaves, or as good as slaves. And in the Bible, which a great many of us view as a holy book, Genesis chapter 1, verse 27, it says, God created male and female in his own image. Which says to me, firstly, that God has a female side. God's not a male. It's male and female. But it says also to me that male and female, none of them is supplicant to the other. We are equal. We are both human. And we both are created in the image of God, whatever you conceive God to be. And the religion, whatever comes into the future of religion, it must be that it starts from that connection that we are male and female, created in the image of a deity. And as other people have said before that, so it starts inside. Who am I? What can I do? Why am I here? And I'm very lucky. I grew up in a society which allowed me to have an education, allowed me to have some freedom, allowed me to make choices of my own. A great many people in this world don't have that opportunity. But even in the religion I grew up in, which is Anglican, Protestant Anglican, it was only in the last couple of decades they've even allowed females to become priests or bishops. And in many others, it's male dominated. And I don't want to beat this drum too heavily, but I won't be part of any religion in the future that doesn't respect both genders, each to the other.
As I've been listening to what's been said, first of all, whatever I was going to say has changed. I don't know what I was going to say, but now I have to say something different because I'm somewhere else. But there was a word that caught me, and that word was simplicity. As I was thinking through this approach to religion, and I find that in the simple things that I meet, my religion is given birth to. Fairly recently, an 18-month-old little boy became a neighbor of mine. He'd been evacuated from the north of Israel and is now living in the village. And somehow a friendship evolved. He caused it with his waving. He loves to wave, and I love to wave back to him. And it's developed, and he runs halteringly up the path to meet me. And there is an exchange that goes on, which hasn't got much to do with words. He hasn't got many, nor have I for that matter. But there is a beauty in that exchange. There is a beauty in a young life. And there is a massive desire in me to allow that life, to give that life the possibility of becoming what it is unto itself. And I think, and there are other threads, but that's one of the central threads of my religious journey.
Hi, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here and to deal in these realms. What I'd like to pick up one small thread, even though there are many that I could pick up. But the one thread I would like to pick up is, it seems to me that just like we look at the past and we look at the different epoch journeys, there needs to be an accumulation somewhere of experience and intelligence. And if I go back as a small fractal of humanity, and I was born in the 50s, so I've got a journey I can look back at. I can definitely see that I've gained experience, I've gained intelligence, and I can say that my ability to look beyond the surface has absolutely increased. And I will add one more thing. it's not just my ability to look beyond the surface, it's to have value beyond the surface. And that has enriched my life. At the age of 70, we've been speaking about my grandson, but my grandchildren, actually, I have three. What has happened is, if I look over the past 5 years, my value for the simple things has increased logarithmically. And I think it's this pilgrimage, and that's one of the threads I will put it in now. It's been a pilgrimage of value and experience, and it's, you know, it's one of the fruits of getting old that is possible if we do this pilgrimage. So I'd like to leave it there, but there's so much more in this. So thank you.
Thank you, Julie.
Hello, everyone. I wanted to bring a lateral approach to all these things which have been mentioned so far, to do with values and principles and inner search and pilgrimage, looking at it from a different point of view, which is, I think, something that definitely needs to be harvested and rescued from religions before it dies off completely. And that is the lens of accountability. So the religions brought into the human mind, the human perception, the aspect of accountability, that we are accountable for what we do, even when no one is looking. Eventually, we are accountable. And this gives a very different perspective to how we humans view the world. It's not just us. It's not just the people around us. There is something else to which we're accountable to. Now, this aspect has been obviously, as well as everything else, misused and eroded through the years for people's controlling people through, guilt, punishment, or whatever else you want to bring it to. But in the end of the day, who are we actually accountable to when no one is looking? Are we going to do the right thing even when nobody will know it? No other human, at least. So the aspect of accountability is very different today, of course, because today we are by law accountable to the state, to the tax authorities, to the judicial system, and to all these institutions which we have built in order to improve our lives and make a progress as humanity. But we are accountable to them. And what happens when the trust in the institutions getting eroded? Well, accountability is lost. And we turn to ourselves and we say, well, I'm not accountable to you. I'm accountable to myself. But then what in me am I accountable to? So it's my answer to that would be what most of you have mentioned. It's what values, what principles have I actually built in me that I can be held accountable to, from myself to myself. And this is one more way for me to blend the personal aspect into what established religions have brought into the world, and how it seems to be turning towards personal focus, which I just want to mention before leaving it there, that if a person is truly accountable to what lives in them, then they don't really need to be accountable to anything else. And that can be revolutionary. And thus would not be necessarily promoted by those who would prefer to keep things under control. Let's put it mildly this way. I'm not asking for a revolution or anything, yeah. I'm just putting it there that it's a revolutionary act to decide to be accountable to myself and to what I have built as my own character, as my own values, and as my own principles.
Thank you. Thank you, Christos.
One of the first ideas to me is that a human lifespan is pretty short. And so I've always had this feeling that I was born into something that's ongoing before me and it's ongoing beyond me. So what have I been born into? And you know, can I become a part of what that is? And perhaps as a next step, can I contribute to whatever that ongoing process is? So to me, that's the beginning of a religious journey. And with your idea of the upgrading of religion, I'd reframe it and say, what does a religious life look like today? Because I think, yes, there's always the strict life of convent, ashram, mountaintop. We have these these ideas of how to lead a religious life. But I think so much of what we're talking about is this, that it's coming back inside us. And it's this journey back inside us to where we are in our life. And I would imagine all the people on this call would come at it slightly differently. Their religious view would be slightly different, even though many things might be in common. And I think that tells us something, that it begins with where you are. And you have to, wherever you're going with it, it begins where you are. And, you know, on the Portal site, we've got, you've written about the post-guru world, which I think is also this pointing inward to finding our own self-authoring and self-responsibility. And also the portals into the soul work, which again is bringing us closer in contact with who we are and what is our nature and what is our relationship with this whole universe that we're a part of. So all these things combine together for this upgrade to me. And one of the things I would say that you bring forth from religions are the ceremonies and the rituals and the repetitions, because these are our touchstones to how we stay in the connection of why and what we're doing and what is giving us meaning. And I think as we refine that journey, just get closer and closer to no difference between what we want to be and project into the world and what the world is also doing, that's just our path of refinement to and a personal religious journey. So yeah, it's a big place to get into, which I love. So thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, Peter.
Hello, I don't know where that will fit in a thread. That's for you to decide. But there is a little story really definitely changed my life. And this one is, I was in my 20s, early 20s, working in music industries in Paris. And my neighbor was a very well-known critic, producer of music. And very often 2-3 times a week, we were going to listen to some music of any kind. He was a jazz critic, but we were listening to any kind of music. Sometimes we were driving an hour, sometimes we were driving 2 hours. And one day I asked Maurice, that was his name, Maurice, sometimes we drive 2 hours. And I know the music we listen there is not your cup of tea. What do you write? And he said, Emmanuel, listen, I never wrote anything bad. I always find something good about their country, their personal life, their instrument, whatever. I always find something good to write. I never wrote anything bad. Then he stopped and he looked at me and he said, you know why? And he fixed at me in the eyes and he said, because their music is their religion. And you don't touch someone's religion.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel. Thank you.
Oh, that was a beautiful story. What's coming up in me is to do with a trace, a short trace. And that is, it is debatable how long this human species has been around for, but a lot of people do believe there is an evolutionary path of some kind. So, in a way, thinking of it almost like a child growing, the species being like a child growing, is causing me to wonder, well, when a child is young, it needs help. It needs a bit of adjustment. It needs to know what's right and wrong in certain cases. And so I've noticed there have been these beneficial influences that have come in at different times in history. That could be debatable as well, but in their essence, there were many influences that were helpful to the growing human, I don't want to say race, but the human itself. And so within it was behavioral science, within it was instruction to respect and care. And so these things were part of an input that went into the gene pool, as it were, of the human species as it's developed. But like a child, there's a point where you get to a certain age where what fitted when you were 7 no longer fits when you're 14. So really what I'm getting at is change is needed. It's part of a natural growth cycle, and it appears in nature on me and also in the way human beings grow as well. So it causes me to wonder about if something becomes very fixed and rigid, is it time to be updated? ? Because has something worn out its welcome or its use? So I wanted to put that in because there's something organic about change, and human life has needed help, and now it's into another phase, or it seems to be. So that's my bit.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris.
I would love to follow along the trace of religion because it's quite a fascinating, interesting, enigmatic domain, especially if we go back into the red times of Egypt. And much is known about it, much is not known about it. But we do know that they were humans and they had abilities that could be very helpful in our world today at a practical level, because our times are moving quickly, radically quickly, and it's causing a lot of stress in people in the world because they're not accustomed to it and not dealing with it well, and you see anxiety and depression and all kind of disorders. And somehow religion can play into that and help. And it's reasonable to see that these speeds are not by accident, but most likely and definitely it's due to some kind of plan or some kind of engineering out there into the universe. And it's also reasonable to consider that the human being is part of that plan and embedded in all of us at birth is a technology to be able to move successfully and safely through this evolution and this transition. The challenge and the reality is as we look at the timeline of the epochs, most of, if not all of that technology, for most people, lies dormant, embedded inside of us. And there's probably numerous reasons for that, and religion probably has its part to play. And so today, perhaps a vital role in religious practices is to learn about, educate, facilitate, and allow the human design and allow the human to be moved by and fashioned by those dormant systems that will provide an intelligence that's very much needed, as well as an alignment, as well as perceptions that are necessary and not easily available today, and activating the unused parts of us and our dormant parts of the mind and brain.
Thank you. Thank you, Philip.
Thank you. And good morning from, it is morning. I live in the Pacific Northwest of the United States, so it is morning. And what's really curious is I keep seeing all these stories about people in this part of the country who are described as the most unchurched people in the country. So they take these surveys once. I find this very strange. So they take these surveys and they ask people, what's your religion? Do you go to church? And locally, it was like 65% of the people thought about that. They had to think about religion and they said, no, I do not belong to religion. I do not go to church. And it was very strong and definitive. And I find that very interesting. And then I also look around at what's happening in the world and you see this, it's almost like this weird polarity. So what's happening in this country and other countries today is people are going in the other direction. They claim that they are evangelical Christians. Same thing is happening in Israel with Judaism, and you can see it with Islam and with Hindu, is people are being drawn in the other direction. And they say, no, this is my religion, this is my life, this is my identity. They have an identity they build around a specific religion, which has a lot of rules. And they will say, you must do this. So I see this polarity going on of people going to one extreme or the other. And it bothers me in several ways, but especially with what's happening in the polarity with religion, is if you look at world history, religious extremism seldom ends well for anybody, for any human beings. It leads to conflict, it leads to war, it leads to everything that the religionists say they are pursuing. So if you go that route, somehow that it doesn't seem to go anywhere good. for the human race. So I'm just looking at all this, and I don't have any like really big answers for why it's happening and what's going on. So I try to be really simple about it and just look at my own life. And I think that I start with, and this is a little bit about what Emmanuel was hinting at earlier. So I look around and I say, what brings me well-being? Where do I feel really well in myself? I feel healthy, I feel happy, I feel engaged. And there are certain things that I do, a lot of it in nature, where it brings this enormous sense of not just me being well, but I feel connected to other things. I start feeling connected to nature and the planet in a different way. And I start feeling connected to bigger things around me that seem to have systems and cycles and seem to have a purpose. And so I start to find myself, where do I fit in with what feels like a very natural cycle? And then you can start to feel the sort of urging to something even bigger, because the planet's part of, bigger universal cycles. And so I can easily find myself tracing in me. How do I go from me, just feeling well, to feeling connected in a way that I want others to be connected? I want others to be happy. I want others to be the same way. And it's all about a connection to something higher. And so in terms of religion, I don't know. I have trouble trying to define that. But I keep getting back to, if there's something religious or something that the universe or the creational influence would want, it would want us to be well and to be happy and to feel like we are part of something bigger. And I would say if people can find that, great, whatever it is, do more of it. And you're going to have a wellness that will radiate out from you into your community. And so it goes back to what Emmanuel was saying about the man who was writing about jazz. Find something you love and just do it, especially if it's something that brings you such joy that it actually transforms the people around you. So that's how I'm thinking about religion at this moment. It may change tomorrow, but that's where I am today.
Thank you. Thank you, Patrick.
Hello, everyone. And it somehow fits what Patrick just said. What I would want to take into the future, what I would want to harvest from big religions and even small ones, is the craft that people have made with much love. That crafting that took a lot of time and a lot of effort. And a big example is the cathedrals, where people invested in something that they knew they would never see finished. So investment in something driven by something else and a love of making it, because I'm sure people loved to do some embroidery in small and weaving, but with an eye on the future, continuation, for other people to taste the fruit of what they were making. That is one aspect. And another aspect is the religion of what works. Because I realize what someone else said, change. If you keep looking for what works, you're always prompted to search for something else, something better. And maybe this way you also make yourself fit to go with the times and the different needs of what the times we live in. So that's my contribution.
Thank you. Thank you, Emmy.
Yeah, these are two stories about, maybe you could call it a religion as well. The religion of raising young people and accompanying them whilst they discover what life is about. And the first one is about my own life. When I was a young boy, I was raised in a Christian tradition. I remember the first time that I consciously walked into a church. This was a small church. Normally you enter from the back, and then in the front there is the holy part. But in this church there was a door on the side, almost in the front. And I went there with my parents, and I must have been 4 or 5 years old. I could walk on my own. That's what I remember. And I entered this church, and I was excited because it was a new place I'd never been in. Young people are, young children, they are curious. They want to find out. So I entered this place, and I saw all these people already sitting there. And in the front, there were these 2 rows, completely empty. And I happily ran to the front row, and I sat into that chair. And something happened that I didn't understand at all. My mother ran after me, and she took me from that chair, and we quickly went to somewhere in the back of the church, and all these people seemed to react to it. Later, I found out that these chairs were reserved for people that had a function in that community. And nobody explained it to me. Later, I got to understand that. So that's one way of teaching a child how to behave. And I had to find out by myself because I was sensitive to things that happened that were not right. So that's one story. And then there's a story of my wife. We live here, we have quite a large garden. And she has a love for attending the garden. And this is wonderful to watch and sometimes to listen, because she actually speaks to plants. Even when something has to be taken out, she tells the plant, well, thank you for being there, but now it's time you get removed, so that you know I get you out. And but it's a large garden, it's a lot of work, and she's getting a little bit older. So one day she said, I'm going to look for somebody to help me in the garden. So she put an advertisement in the local supermarket. And I guess one mother found that advertisement who had a young boy that wanted to earn some money. So she got a phone call, and the young boy, he said, well, I want to try. And I remember him coming in the first time, and he must have been 13 years old. It was a year ago. It was a shy, timid boy. And he was more into computers and mathematics, and he didn't know anything about gardening. The only thing he knew that if he would spend some time here, he would get some money. Well, it turned out a little bit different, because my wife started to take him on. And many times when I work here at home, I just go out of the door and I listen. And she's constantly talking to him, and she's constantly showing him, and she's constantly. And in the beginning, it was really funny to see this boy not knowing anything about what he was doing. And I could even see him when they were bringing back the tools to the little shed, that he took one by one, and he was not efficient. And one day I saw my lady show him, well, you can take the wheelbarrow, put everything in, and well, okay. Last month, he came to our house and he asked, well, I work here now for a year, maybe can I earn a little bit of more money? So, and it's wonderful what happened, because we talked about it and we said, well, okay, that's good. He has been working for a year. And the next time he came, my lady, she had a little notebook and a pen, and she told this boy, well, what we're going to do is I'm going to make some coffee, and you're going to walk around the garden, you're going to have a look, and you just simply write down what needs to happen today. And the first response of this boy was like, but I cannot do that. And I said, well, you can do it. Just make a try, and we'll see what comes out of it. And I've seen him walking around in the garden and looking at things. And the story of this is because he came back with a list. And maybe not everything was needed to be done, because there's seasons in the year and certain things you see that need to be done, but you have to wait until, for example, the flowers are not there anymore. But it's wonderful to watch this, that if you have a love for something, like my wife has, and you share it with somebody that doesn't know that much yet, that something beautiful comes out of it. And the most beautiful is that if a person starts to take on things from themselves and start to research and discover from themselves, I think that's the start of personal religion.
This happened in last century, mid of the last century, around 1960s, 70s. When I was a child, I was a bit 10 years old, and we spent every time off vacation in a small village in France. It was just a street with houses, maybe on a voting rolls, there were maybe 50 adults signed up and a lot of children. And I spent a lot of time to a house across the street, at a lady's house. She was in her having age. She didn't have much. I don't even think she owned a bicycle. But every day, no matter the weather, snow, rain, sun, every morning, I must say that this time, France was mostly Catholic. Every morning she was getting up, taking a long keys. They were very impressed by the length of the keys. She was walking on the other side of the village, and she was opening the door of the church. The church you may have seen one priest a year, and every night she was doing the same way, going to the church, locking the door, bringing the key at home. Every day, every day. And one day I asked her, why do you do that? Because I don't think anybody's come during the day. And she said, yes, you're right. But maybe one day somebody will need to come in. And that's where I do the whole difference between religion and religious life.
Thank you. Thank you, Emmanuel.
I've had a small ceremony since I was very young, 5, 6 years old. I had a little ceremony, which was that when mom and dad had put me to bed, and they had their time by the television or whatever they were doing, I had my own time. I got out of bed. I took my duvet into the window, and I sneaked up in the window and looked at stars. And I've done that since I was very small. Then when I got older and got integrated into the sometimes very difficult part of being a part of the world and being part of families and humans that finds it difficult to agree about things, violence appears in the frustration of trying to find a way in life. I still sneaked to the window, looking at stars. Sometimes I looked at stars from the back seat of a police car because the grown-ups were having their fights. And I thought, okay, I'm going to stay here. But I always came back to stargazing. And why am I saying this? Because these times, life and the world offers strange things, like humans walking on the moon. Perhaps that was the last time that humans were connected up as a humanity, because we all know that day when the first person walked on the moon. But I'm hoping to be part of a religion where you can go anywhere from here or from your heart. Because when the world couldn't offer stability or love, the universe did. And the stars have never failed to make me feel part of something that is reliable.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sue. So it seems to me we are opening more pathways of possibility and inquiries into what is it that is emerging in our individual quest and wonders of the mystery of life, because well, most of the axial religions that we know, they emerged as a process of revelation of one kind or another in one person, mostly with a man for some reason. That's the story is told, at least. Although, when you dig a little deeper in all those stories, there is always a very important woman right there next to that person, or before them, or in front of them, or behind them, or on their side, or initiating them to their discovery, but that somehow is often less emphasized. But still, the revelation often appears with one person, and there is a sense in which there is a property and a source of inspiration of some kind. I think Chris described it as a unique property that at different times appeared to enhance, to bless, to uplift the story of humanity. And then around that one person, people gather, and then in some cases it becomes written as scripture, and for the rest of time we celebrate it. A lot of what we're hearing here today has the tone, the invitation of what you describe, Jeremy, as the pilgrimage into yourself. What Marianne described as the tending to the garden, doing the work in the garden. What others have described as attending to whatever circumstance you're in. Maybe the 18 months old that is next to you, Bob, in the way you build communication with them. And if I listen to the unifying thread, it has the property of not seeking to find the revelation somewhere out there, but being present in the here and now. First of all, to find the church, the temple, the synagogue inside this which we are given, we humans are given, this human system, in all that it can feel and do and respond to and conceive, and what it can then give birth to into the ecology in relationship to others, in the servicing to the needs around us. So what I am taking from listening deeply to the mosaic, the weave that has emerged here, is that Where is new religion, if there is such a thing, a religion emerging today? Well, perhaps it's emerging inside us, in many people all over the planet, especially when people slow down, especially when they decide to be present, especially when they decide to honor themselves, the moment, the space, the place they're in, and perhaps then bring their attention, our attention, to whatever we choose to bring it to, a cause, a person in need, something we choose to champion. So that's the quality I am harvesting from today. The desire to, and the self-arising capacity that Nigel described right from the very early age as you make the stand for the first time and lift yourself up, that is the call of the religious impulse, to the desire to first lift ourselves up, and then if we find a way to lift others around us and to show up to the places, ecologies and situations we walk into and make them just a little better, uplift them just a little bit. So we're not ending the exploration into the religious impulse. We just had a moment in time catalyzed by the inquiry about how the epoch is evolving and where is it right now, and how is especially the line of religious intuition and inspiration is finding us at this point in time. Thank you for your care, your presence, and let us continue to find those moments where the something else, the translucent, brilliant, luminescent something else that we all feel is part of life, is somehow able to come through and participate in the celebration of our lives. Thank you. We are in the post-recording and already did the summary, and we stayed for a few more minutes. And Rivka just said something that made me turn the recording again. And I'd love for this to end on your words rather than my own.
Yeah, thank you. So I said that it was really being in a deep listening with in this presence, when each one spoke from the naturalness that they are. And there was such a rich flow that when each one spoke and brought something from their life, from their richness, it like rings something inside me. Though I'm not the other person, but I thought, I don't know if this would be a kind of hinting about the new religion, but definitely there is a longing, I think, in those who speak about it or not speak about it, for something that will be kind of all-embracing, or embracing all of us, first of all, because we are human beings first of all. And yeah, thank you for the kind of freedom to be genuine and natural and causing with it this kind of presence that we were in this moment together.